Okay, so Jason, in the summer to autumn of 2024, we coined a term on this podcast, which became a word that other people used out in the world, which is the Bugzilla Bloodbath.
You know, Tim, to me, it was some of the most thoughtful reporting on the most exciting period, and by excited I mean period, in WebPKI.
Whoa, yeah. With the possible exception of now. But yes, agreed. And we talked about it a lot at the time when it was happening. And now that original kind of flurry of incidents and problems has run its course, though the amount of incidents, bugs that's being reported continues to be very high compared to historical numbers. And I thought now, a year to a year and a half later, depending on when you declare it to have stopped, would be a good time to say, did this matter?
Wow.
Is anything different now?
Yeah.
And I have a viewpoint, but go ahead.
I'm going to give you this real simple answer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. And I'd say there's some cosmetic ways that it's different, that it mattered, and then there's some deeper ways that it's mattered. And what I'll call is the cosmetic ways that it mattered, although it certainly isn't cosmetics to those who are directly affected, is distrusts. We went from a pace of maybe having a distrust every other year to we've had 4 in the last 2 years. And you and I predicted in our 2026 predictions episode, and I feel good about this prediction, that we won't make the year without more. And so, let's say there's 2 more hypothetically, right? If you got 6 in 3 years, that's just a very different pace than what we were on before. And so that's an obvious consequence. And connected to that, the consequence that we're now all, any thoughtful person who's following the space is aware of the fact that root store distrust is a legitimate tool in the root store's toolkit that can and when necessary will be used. Yep. Right? So that's a consequence. Now, with something in the ballpark of 80 roots in the popular root stores, you might argue that taking 4 out isn't that material, right? That's a legitimate way of looking at it, even though one of them was pretty popular. But I think the deeper impact is coming out of the Bugzilla Bloodbath, and as a direct consequence, it tuned up the community of people who demand quality and precision and transparency from public CAs. This is more than browser root stores, though it certainly includes browser root stores. It is academics, it is concerned citizens, it is white hats, it is auditors, it is certain members of the CA community. It got that group activated in a way they hadn't been previously. And it got that group understanding with clarity a more effective way to demand quality and accuracy from the CAs. The Bugzilla Bloodbath directly led to changes in language and the form of root store policies to clarify expectations, to close loopholes, to demand more precision and more consistency and accuracy. The Bugzilla Bloodbath ultimately led to some of the initiatives and some of the work that we're talking about now. So you and I have talked lately about the increased scrutiny on CPSs and what they say.
Yes.
And that our CA is behaving accurately to their CPS. And you and I have talked about how that was, for a lot of years, that was all real sludgy. And it's still sludgier than many people would prefer, but it's crystallizing at a rapid rate. And ultimately, I think there has been a philosophy shift that should not be underrepresented in how we demand consistent compliance and correct compliance and transparency and action about non-compliance from our public CAs.
I think that's top of the list.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And the action about non-compliance, this is another big one, right? You must have, like, according to policy, you must have a clear action item, one or more clear actions items for every root cause of every incident. And you have to be able to map them back. And when CAs don't do that, they get called out. And there is a demand that they do, right? If I'm going to say that something that one of the root causes was that people make mistakes, then I need an action plan for that. And so that's a new way of thinking, right? And that level of rigor that has been added to the process and that is demanded is definitely new. It's post Bugzilla Bloodbath, and it's a direct consequence.
I think that's a great articulation, and
Right.
it's a great reflection on that time and where we are now.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, obviously, there's a list of very specific loopholes and dodges and bad things. And some of this is bad reporting, bad transparency, bad revocation, where the level of tolerance for this has just, where you used to be able to get away with it, getting away with it's gotten really hard.
Yep.
And that's part and parcel of the same thing as well. So I think that's the big outcome, is this sort of fundamental attitudinal shift about what's expected of a CA. And in my opinion, I think this is very healthy.
I think I'm quoted as saying on this podcast before, as we were going through this podcast, that a healthy self-policing system is one in which it actually has teeth, actually acts, actually makes real improvements through time, does the hard things. Mm-hmm. You know, a self-filtering system is going to be a better one.
Yeah.
And I think now, even what constitutes the filtering rules are a lot more clear. Mm-hmm. And I think that those of us who are left standing through that bloodbath there might even be more comfort right now.
Yeah, I think if you're buttoned up, if you're a CA that feels like you have a handle on your rules and your processes, I think there may be more comfort. I think there are a lot of CAs that either are deeply uncomfortable or should be and aren't, which is absolutely worse for their prospects, who don't understand at some level, to the point where it translates to consistent action, don't understand that expectations are not what they were 2 years ago. And they're still operating like it was 2 years ago. Or there are CAs where maybe there are people who operate the CA on the day-to-day get it, but the people who ultimately are responsible for certain decisions, who have to approve or greenlight certain choices or have the ability to block certain actions, don't get it.
Right.
And that's part of the reason that I forecast additional distrust, because I think, unfortunately, there appear to be some slow learners in the group.
Well, then the filter will work.
Right. And you hope, you imagine that what'll happen is somewhere along the line, everybody's going to get the memo. And, we're not wishing for any more distrusts, but if those distrusts do occur, you hope that the consequence is that that next slowest antelope realizes that it needs to run faster, right? Before it gets eaten too.
Yeah. That sometimes stress can be a motivator.
Yeah. Right.
I think that's what you're saying. Yeah. And some of these CAs might improve to be above the threshold.
Right. Exactly. And all of this doesn't come from a perspective of cruelty or sadism. We don't want to make the CAs
we're not in the business
unhappy,
of that.
Right? It comes from a perspective of enforcing a certain level of quality that's deemed to be necessary for the system that fundamentally serves the public trust of nearly 6 billion humans. And when you look at it that way, then a distrust is viewed as an unfortunate but necessary consequence of inability to meet expectations, or unwillingness, perhaps, could be either, to meet expectations. And I do think that, we will hit a point where we're not predicting additional distrust events,
right,
because the folks who just aren't able to get the memo have all suffered the consequences of not getting the memo.
Exactly. Right. If eventually you get to the point of equilibrium.
Right. And that maybe the more of these things happen, maybe the message does sink in places where it hasn't sunk in yet.
Yeah.
So, I think ultimately, and the reason I wanted to say something about this, and we can leave this here, is we stopped talking about it, and that actual kind of period is gone. But I think we're in a post Bugzilla Bloodbath era that in important ways is different from what the WebPKI looked like 2 years ago.
Yes. And your opening question, yeah, there absolutely was an impact. Are we in a better place? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
All right.